I'm Becky, 35 years old, and I'll never forget the moment my entire family burst into laughter when I told them I owned 21 coffee shops. My brother Jake nearly choked on his wine, calling me delusional. My mother Dorothy put down her fork and said I was embarrassing myself with pathetic lies. Even my father Richard, who rarely showed emotion, shook his head in complete disgust while my sister-in-law Madison filmed everything promising to make me internet famous for all the wrong reasons. Before we dive into how this Christmas dinner turned into the most revealing night of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you spending time with family who truly supports your dreams? Hit that like button if you've ever felt misunderstood by the people who should know you best, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story about family betrayal and sweet vindication is one you won't want to miss. Trust me, the ending will change how you see every family gathering forever. The Richardson family Christmas dinner was supposed to be a celebration of togetherness after 5 long years of separation. But sitting at that mahogany table in my parents' Connecticut mansion, I remembered exactly why I'd stayed away. You see, in the Richardson family hierarchy, I'd always been the broken rung on the ladder of success the cautionary tale parents whispered about when their children showed signs of creativity or independent thinking. My brother Jake had claimed his throne as the golden child the moment he'd graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, stepping seamlessly into a position at Goldman Sachs that our father had practically gift-wrapped for him through his connections. Now, at 38, Jake wore his vice president title like a crown, his every achievement meticulously documented in our mother's Facebook posts, and our father's golf club boasts. His wife Madison, a trust fund princess who'd never worked a day in her life, complemented his image perfectly with her charity galas and strategic social climbing. Together, they embodied everything our parents had dreamed their children would become. Then there was me, Becky, the disappointment. Becky the dreamer. Becky the law school dropout who'd thrown away a promising future to work in coffee shops like some kind of bohemian cliché. The family narrative about me had been carved in stone the day I'd walked out of Yale Law, after one semester, tears streaming down my face as I realized I'd rather die than spend my life drowning in contracts and billable hours. That was 12 years ago, but in the Richardson family court of opinion, statutes of limitations didn't exist for the crime of choosing your own path. The 5-year silence between us had started after what I now call the Thanksgiving massacre, when I'd made the mistake of bringing my then-fiancé, Eric, to dinner. Eric was a jazz musician talented beyond measure, but without a trust fund or an Ivy League degree to make him palatable to my family's refined tastes. They'd spent the entire meal dissecting his career choices, his earning potential, his family background, until finally Jake had pulled me aside and asked if I was really throwing my life away on another loser. I'd left that night and hadn't returned until today, when my mother's guilt-laden phone calls about maybe seeing her daughter one last Christmas while she still could had worn down my defenses. I'd deliberately driven my old Honda Civic to the gathering, leaving my Tesla Model S safely parked in my garage back in the city. I wore a simple black dress from Target, nothing that would hint at the reality of my life now. It was easier to let them see what they expected to see, or so I'd thought. The moment I'd walked through the door, the assessment had begun. My mother's eyes had swept over me with that familiar mixture of disappointment and pity, while my father had barely looked up from his Wall Street Journal. Jake had actually laughed when he saw me nudging Madison to whisper something that made her diamond earrings dance as she giggled. The extended family was there in full force, too. Uncle Theodore, my father's brother, who'd built a real estate empire from scratch, sat at the far end of the table, like a medieval lord surveying his domain. His son Bradley, my younger cousin who'd launched a tech startup at 22, kept his phone propped against his water glass, ready to document anything worth sharing with his 50,000 Instagram followers. Aunt Jennifer, my mother's sister who'd married into old money, perched beside her daughter Sandra, both of them wearing matching expressions of polite disdain. Even my grandmother Agnes had made the journey from her retirement community, though her hearing aids seemed conveniently adjusted to miss any conversation that didn't interest her. As we'd settled around the table, the traditional Richardson family performance had begun. Jake launched into a detailed account of his latest promotion, making sure to mention the $500,000 bonus that came with it. Madison complimented his story with tales of her charity work, somehow managing to make feeding the homeless sound like a personal favor to society. Bradley demonstrated his company's new app, while Uncle Theodore casually mentioned his latest building acquisition in Manhattan. The conversation flowed like a carefully orchestrated symphony of success, each family member playing their part in the grand composition of Richardson achievement. When the spotlight finally turned to me, I'd felt the familiar knot in my stomach, the one that had formed in childhood and never quite untangled. My mother's voice dripped with false encouragement as she said, "Becky, dear, why don't you tell everyone what you've been up to? Are you still working at that little cafe in Brooklyn?" I'd taken a deep breath, my hands steady on my lap as I'd said the words I'd practiced in the mirror that morning. "Actually, I own some coffee shops now. 21 locations to be exact." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Then Jake's laughter had shattered it like a brick through glass, followed by a wave of disbelief that crashed over the table with the force of a tsunami. And that's when I'd realized this wasn't going to be just another family dinner. This was going to be a reckoning. The laughter started with Jake, but spread through the room like wildfire, each family member adding their own special brand of derision to the chorus. Jake wiped tears from his eyes as he pulled out his iPhone, making a show of typing into the search bar. "Let me just check something here," he announced to the table, his voice dripping with theatrical concern. "Strange, I can't seem to find any business called Becky's Delusional Coffee Empire anywhere online. Must be a glitch in Google, right?" Madison leaned into him, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her champagne flute as she added her own twist to the knife. "Oh, honey, I think she's counting every Starbucks she's ever visited. You know how creative types can be with their math. Remember when she said she was a published writer because she had a blog?" The table erupted again, and I watched my mother cover her mouth, though. Whether to hide her laughter or her shame, I couldn't tell. Uncle Theodore, never one to miss an opportunity to showcase his business acumen, stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. 21 locations. That's quite specific, Becky. Most pathological liars stick to round numbers. But then again, you always were special, weren't you? His tone suggested that special was not a compliment in the Richardson vocabulary. Bradley had his phone out now, live streaming to his followers with the enthusiasm of a nature documentarian who'd just discovered a new species. "Okay, everybody, welcome to the Richardson Family Christmas Cringe compilation. You're witnessing a live breakdown where my cousin Becky just claimed she owns 21 coffee shops. 21. The chat is going wild right now. Someone just said this is better than reality TV. I felt my cheeks burn as I watched him pan the camera around the table, capturing every smirk, every head shake, every theatrical eye roll. My teenage cousin Emma, who I'd once taught to ride a bike, was covering her mouth to stifle her giggles while texting furiously under the table. Even she had joined the pack, and something inside me cracked a little at that betrayal. But they were just warming up. Once the initial shock of my supposed delusion wore off, the conversation shifted to a more familiar territory, cataloging my failures. It was like they'd been storing ammunition for 5 years, and now they had permission to unload every single round. "Remember when she dropped out of law school?" Aunt Jennifer began, her voice pitched perfectly between sympathy and condescension. One semester at Yale Law, and she couldn't hack it. Do you know how many people would kill for that opportunity? My mother jumped in, eager to share her own grievances. She was seeing a therapist at the time, you know. Dr. Morrison said she had issues with authority and unrealistic expectations about life. We spent thousands on those sessions trying to fix whatever was broken, but she just wouldn't listen. "The therapy was because you tried to control every aspect of my life," I said quietly, but my voice was drowned out by Jake's booming laugh. Oh, the therapy. How could I forget about the therapy years? Remember when she thought she was going to be an actress, then a novelist, then a photographer. What was it after that, Beck's interpretive dance? He was on a roll now, his investment banker confidence fueling his cruelty. And let's not forget the parade of loser boyfriends. That drummer who lived in his van, the poet who paid rent with haikus, and Eric, oh Eric, the jazz musician who thought playing saxophone at subway stations was a career path. Madison clutched her pearls in mock horror. Didn't she work at 5 different coffee shops in 2 years, I remember, because Dorothy used to cry about it at the country club. "My daughter the barista," she'd say. "We all felt so bad for you, Dorothy." My father, who'd been quietly cutting his prime rib throughout the assault, finally looked up. 21 coffee shops. He repeated slowly as if tasting the words. "You know what's truly pathetic, Rebecca? It's not that you're lying. It's that you think we're stupid enough to believe it. I've spent 40 years in finance. I know what it takes to build a business, let alone 21 of them. You can barely keep a checking account balanced. Remember the lemonade stand?" Sandra chimed in, eager to contribute to the pile-on. She was 8 years old and convinced she was going to franchise lemonade stands across the neighborhood. Charged $5 a cup and wondered why no one bought any. Even then, she was delusional about business. Grandmother Agnes, who I'd thought wasn't following the conversation, suddenly spoke up with surprising clarity. Her grandfather would be so disappointed. He always said Becky had promise, but I told him she was too much of a dreamer. Guess I was right. The attacks came faster now, a relentless barrage of every mistake, every failed attempt, every dream that hadn't panned out exactly as planned. They brought up the time I'd auditioned for the drama club and forgotten my lines. The college rejection letters they'd apparently saved. The photos from my old studio apartment that my mother had taken during one of her concern visits, which she'd shown to her friends as evidence of how far I'd fallen. "I tried to help her," Uncle Theodore announced to the table. "She came to me 3 years ago with some business proposal. Couldn't even put together a proper presentation. Just had this notebook full of scribbles and dreams. I told her to get a real job, first prove she could handle responsibility, then maybe we'd talk. Never heard from her again." Jake pulled out his phone again, scrolling through something with a predatory smile. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen toward the table. Her Instagram from 3 years ago. Living on ramen and dreams. Another job interview, fingers crossed. Sometimes the struggle is real. And my personal favorite, one day I'll show them all. Well, Becky, is this your big moment? Is this you showing us all? The room erupted in fresh laughter, and I felt something inside me shift. The hurt was still there, sharp and familiar, but underneath it was something else. Something harder. Something that had been forged in the fires of their doubt and tempered by years of their dismissal. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me all figured out, filed away in their neat little box labeled family failure. They had no idea who I'd become while they weren't watching. As the laughter died down, Jake's expression shifted from amused to concerned, the way a cat might look concerned about the mouse it's torturing. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine with the practiced ease of someone who'd taken corporate entertainment classes. "You know, Becky, we've all been worried about you. That's why we've been keeping tabs." My stomach dropped. "Keeping tabs? Oh, come on," he said, pulling out his phone again. "You didn't think you could just disappear for 5 years and we wouldn't check up on you? I've been monitoring your social media, making sure you weren't spiraling too badly. Look, here's your post from 18 months ago about struggling to make rent. And this one about eating cereal for dinner again. And my personal favorite, the motivational quote about success being just around the corner. We all know which corner you meant. The one where the food bank is located." Madison touched his arm with fake concern. "Jake and I actually had a bet going about how long it would take before you asked for money. I said 6 months after you showed up. He was more generous and said you'd last a year. Although now, with this whole 21 coffee shops fantasy, maybe we were both wrong. Maybe you're having a complete break from reality instead." The words hit me like physical blows, but what came next was worse. My mother set down her wine glass with a delicate clink and folded her hands in her lap. "Becky, sweetheart, I need to confess something. When people at the club ask about you, I tell them you're traveling abroad finding yourself. It's easier than explaining that my daughter is... well, that she's struggling. The Petersons' daughter just made partner at her firm, And the Weatherby's son just sold his startup for millions. What am I supposed to say that mine is probably working minimum wage somewhere? My father nodded in agreement. We've had to manage the narrative, Rebecca. The Richardson name means something in this community. Your brother is carrying on the legacy beautifully, but you're a liability. Do you know how many times I've had to deflect questions about you at the golf club? A liability. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Show her the group chat, Bradley said suddenly, a cruel smile playing on his lips. She should know what we're dealing with. Jake hesitated for just a moment, then shrugged. Why not? Maybe it'll help her understand how much we care. He scrolled through his phone and turned it toward me. There it was in digital black and white, a group chat titled, Dealing with Becky. The messages scrolled by like a greatest hits compilation of concern, trolling, and condescension. Has anyone heard from B lately? Worried she might be homeless? Saw her tagged in a photo at some dive bar. At least she's not on the streets. We need to plan an intervention when she finally shows up. Make sure to have job applications ready. Don't lend her money directly. She'll just waste it. You've been planning this, I said, the realization washing over me like ice water. This whole dinner, this reunion. It was never about bringing the family together. It was about staging an intervention. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. We love you, sweetheart. That's why we prepared these. She slid the folder across the table to me. Inside were brochures for job training programs, community college applications, and even information about financial counseling services. We've done the research. There are programs that can help people like you get back on their feet. People like me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. And what kind of person is that exactly? Uncle Theodore cleared his throat. The kind who refuses to live in reality, Becky. The kind who would rather fantasize about success than work for it. I told your parents years ago that enabling your delusions wasn't helping. Sometimes tough love is the only answer. Remember when you were 16 and swore you were going to be on Broadway? Jake said, warming to his theme. We all went along with it, didn't we? Paid for the voice lessons, the dance classes, the acting coaches. And where did that lead? One failed audition and you gave up. Just like you gave up on law school. Just like you gave up on every job you've ever had. She didn't just give up, Madison added helpfully. She made scenes. Remember the coffee shop that fired her? She told everyone it was because they couldn't handle her innovative ideas. The truth was, she kept giving away free coffee to people she felt sorry for. You can't run a business with feelings, Becky. Aunt Jennifer nodded sagely. It's a pattern of behavior. We've all seen it. The grandiose ideas, the inability to follow through, the victim mentality when things don't work out. Classic signs of, well, we're not doctors, but we have eyes. I kept all your college rejection letters, my mother said suddenly, and I turned to stare at her in disbelief. What I thought they might motivate you someday. Harvard, Stanford, Princeton. They all said no. Only Yale Law took a chance on you, and look how you repaid that opportunity. You kept my rejection letters. I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. Why would you do that? Because someone needs to remember reality when you won't, she replied. Just like I kept the photos of that horrible apartment you lived in, the one with the broken window and the radiator that didn't work. You could have come home any time, but you were too proud, too stubborn, living in squalor rather than admit you needed help. Bradley had switched from live streaming to recording, capturing every moment for posterity. This is going in the family archives, he announced. The night we tried to save Becky from herself. Again. Your grandparents died worried about you. Grandmother Agnes added, her voice cutting through the noise. Your grandfather especially. He left you that little bit of money in his will, hoping you'd use it wisely. Instead, you probably spent it on another one of your schemes. He'd be heartbroken if he knew. The mention of my grandfather's inheritance made me bite my tongue so hard I tasted blood. They had no idea what I'd done with that money. No idea that his faith in me had been the seed that grew into everything they were currently mocking. But I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. First, I needed them to show me exactly who they really were. So this whole thing was coordinated, I said, looking around the table. You all knew. You all planned this together. The invitation, the dinner, the confrontation. 5 years of silence, and this is how you welcome me back. We're trying to help you, my father said, his tone suggesting he was being incredibly patient. But you have to want to be helped. You have to admit you have a problem first. My problem, I said slowly, is sitting at this table. See? Jake threw his hands up. This is exactly what we're talking about. You can't handle truth, so you lash out. You can't handle reality, so you create fantasies. 21 coffee shops. Do you even hear yourself? Do you know what it takes to run one successful business, let alone 21? The capital, the planning, the execution. You can't even commit to a hairstyle for more than 6 months. The table erupted in agreement, everyone adding their own evidence of my instability, my delusions, my fundamental failure as a Richardson. They'd planned this ambush with military precision, each of them armed with their own ammunition ready to break me down until I admitted what they all believed, that I was nothing without them, that I was a failure who needed their intervention, their guidance, their control. What they didn't realize was that they were about to learn the price of underestimating someone they'd dismissed. Because while they'd been planning their intervention, I'd been building an empire. And their disbelief was about to collide with reality in a way none of them could have imagined. I reached for my phone with steady hands, though my heart was racing like a thoroughbred at the starting gate. You want to see my coffee shops? Fine, let me show you something. I pulled up my photo gallery, scrolling to the album I'd labeled Rising Sun Coffee Collection, and turned the screen toward the table. Stock photos, Jake announced before even looking properly. Becky, come on. You can download professional coffee shop images from anywhere. This is just sad now. I flipped to a photo of me standing in front of our flagship Manhattan location wearing a hard hat and holding blueprints during the renovation. Madison squinted at it, then shook her head. Photoshop has gotten really good these days. My friend Emma does this for her Instagram all the time. She can put herself anywhere. What about this? I scrolled to a picture of my management team at our quarterly meeting. All 42 shift supervisors and location managers gathered in our Brooklyn training facility. These are my employees, real people with real jobs. Actors, Uncle Theodore said dismissively. You can hire people on Craigslist for $50 to pose for photos. I've seen it done for fake company websites. Classic scam technique. My mother studied the photos with the expression of someone examining evidence at a crime scene. Sweetheart, these elaborate fantasies aren't healthy. Dr. Morrison warned us about this. You create entire worlds in your head to avoid dealing with reality. Would bank statements help? I offered already, knowing the answer. I can show you the business accounts, the revenue streams, the loan payments I've made on time every single month. Jake laughed so hard he almost spilled his wine. Bank statements. Becky, please, do you know how easy it is to fake financial documents? There are templates online. You probably spent hours creating fake statements to support your delusion. It's actually concerning how far you're taking this. The company is called Rising Sun Coffee Collections. I said, trying a different approach. We were featured in Forbes last month. Entrepreneur magazine did a profile on our sustainable sourcing practices. Food and Wine called our house blend one of the top 10 coffee discoveries of the year. Bradley was typing furiously on his phone, then shook his head with theatrical disappointment. I mean, there is a company called Rising Sun Coffee Collections, but the owner is listed as R.M. Richardson. Nice try using initials to make it seem like it could be you. But we all know Richardson is a common name. R.M. Richardson is me, I protested. Rebecca Marie Richardson. I use initials for business to avoid gender bias in initial negotiations. How convenient, Sandra said with a pitying smile. You found a successful company with a similar name to yours and built a whole fantasy around it. That's actually more disturbing than just making it up from scratch. I pulled out my company credit card, the Black American Express with Rising Sun Coffee Collections, embossed on it along with my name and CEO title. My father examined it like a forensic investigator, then passed it around the table. "Anyone can get a custom credit card made," he announced. "There are novelty websites that create them. You probably maxed out a real credit card paying for this fake one. This is exactly the kind of financial irresponsibility we're talking about. Call the flagship store," I said, desperation creeping into my voice despite my efforts to stay calm. "Right now, call them and ask for the owner. They'll tell you it's me." Jake made a show of looking up the number, dialing it, and putting it on speaker. When the barista answered with our standard greeting, he asked to speak to the owner. "I'm sorry, the owner isn't available in store today," the young woman replied professionally. "Can I take a message? See?" Jake ended the call triumphantly. "Because the real owner is probably some corporate guy who never sets foot in the stores. Unlike you, who's pretending you own them all." I felt like I was drowning in quicksand made of their disbelief. Every piece of evidence I offered was twisted, dismissed, explained away. They'd created such a strong narrative about who I was that no amount of reality could penetrate it. The successful businesswoman sitting in front of them simply couldn't exist in their worldview, so they rejected every proof of her existence. "You know what the saddest part is?" Madison said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's not the lying. It's that you felt you needed to lie to impress us. We would have loved you anyway, Becky. You didn't need to create this elaborate fantasy." "But she did," my mother interjected, "because that's what she does. Rather than face her failures, she creates alternate realities where she's successful. Remember when she was 12 and told everyone at school that she was related to European royalty? That was a genealogy project that got misinterpreted. I protested, but they were on a roll, now cataloging every childhood exaggeration, every teenage dream, every young adult ambition that hadn't panned out exactly as planned. "I think we need to discuss treatment options," Aunt Jennifer said seriously. "There are facilities that specialize in delusional disorders. Very discreet, very professional. The Hartmans sent their son there when he started believing he was a prophet. He's an accountant now. Perfectly normal. I am not delusional." I stood up my chair, scraping against the hardwood floor. "I worked 18-hour days for 5 years to build this business. I lived on ramen and dreams, yes, but I turned every penny of profit back into growing the company. I have 217 employees who depend on me. We serve over 12,000 customers a day across all locations. This is my life, not some fantasy." 217 employees, Jake repeated mockingly. 12,000 customers. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Even got your fake statistics memorized. "What's next? Are you going to tell us you're expanding internationally?" I bit my lip to keep from mentioning the London location we were scouting. There was no point. They'd twisted themselves into such intellectual pretzels to maintain their image of me that they'd reject evidence if I brought in a notarized statement from the president himself. "Sit down, Rebecca," my father commanded. "This outburst is exactly what we're talking about. You can't handle being confronted with truth, so you double down on lies. It's a destructive pattern, and we're not going to enable it anymore." I remained standing, looking around the table at these people who shared my blood but had never shared my dreams. They'd rather believe I was mentally ill than successful. They'd rather see me as a cautionary tale than a triumph. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Their disbelief said nothing about me and everything about them. But I wasn't done yet. Because sometimes the universe has perfect timing, and as if on cue, my phone began to ring. The caller ID showed exactly what I needed it to show, and I answered it with a smile that made my family shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Marcus," I said clearly. "What perfect timing." "Yes, I'm at the family dinner I mentioned. Actually, could you come by? I know it's Christmas, but there's something I need you to bring me." 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang with the kind of timing that would have seemed contrived in a movie, but felt like destiny in real life. My mother looked confused as she went to answer it, muttering about who could possibly be visiting on Christmas evening. The family continued their discussion of my supposed mental health crisis with Jake researching treatment facilities on his phone, while Madison offered suggestions about intervention specialists she'd seen on reality TV shows. The conversation died abruptly when my mother returned to the dining room, followed by Marcus Chen, my executive assistant, looking every inch the corporate professional in his tailored Tom Ford suit, and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His presence immediately shifted the room's energy like a sharp note cutting through a symphony of smugness. "I apologize for interrupting your family dinner," Marcus said smoothly, his Harvard Business School polish evident in every syllable. "Ms. Richardson, I have those acquisition papers you needed to review. The sellers are anxious for a response before the markets open tomorrow." Jake's fork clattered against his plate. "Ms. Richardson," Marcus turned to him with professional courtesy. "Yes, Ms. Rebecca Richardson, CEO of Rising Sun Coffee Collections. I'm Marcus Chen, her executive assistant." He placed a business card on the table with practiced ease. "And you must be the family she's mentioned. It's a pleasure to finally meet you all. This is—" My mother's voice trailed off as she stared at the business card like it might bite her. "Unexpected," Marcus suggested with a slight smile. "Ms. Richardson mentioned you might be surprised. She's quite private about her success. I've worked with her for 3 years, and this is the first time I've heard her mention her family beyond her late grandfather, whose vision inspired the company." Uncle Theodore picked up the business card, examining it with the skepticism of someone who'd exposed plenty of frauds in his real estate career. "Rising Sun Coffee Collections. You're telling us Rebecca, owns this company. Owns, operates, and built from a single failing location in Queens," Marcus confirmed. He pulled out an iPad from his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd given this presentation dozens of times to investors and bankers. "Would you like to see some information about the company? I have our latest investor deck here, though I'll need you to sign NDAs if you want to see the full financial projections for the expansion." Bradley, who'd been live streaming the entire dinner, suddenly looked pale. "Wait, NDAs investor deck? What kind of coffee shop needs NDAs?" Marcus swiped through the presentation, the screen displaying professional photographs of each location, financial graphs showing exponential growth, and press clippings from major publications. "We're not just coffee shops, Mr. Bradley," my cousin managed weakly. "Mr. Bradley, Rising Sun is a lifestyle brand. We have exclusive partnerships with sustainable farms in Colombia and Ethiopia, a proprietary roasting process that's patent pending, and a loyalty program with over 300,000 active members. Ms. Richardson pioneered the concept of coffee concierge service for our premium members, which has been copied by several competitors but never successfully replicated." Jake leaned forward, his investment banker instincts overriding his disbelief. "What kind of revenue are we talking about?" Marcus glanced at me and I nodded. "Last fiscal year, we cleared $47 million in revenue with a net profit margin of 23%. This year, with the addition of 7 new locations, we're projecting $65 million. The acquisition Ms. Richardson is considering tonight would be our 22nd location and our entry into the Boston market. $47 million. Madison whispered, her face cycling through expressions like a slot machine trying to find the right combination of shock and greed. My father, the financial expert who knew what it took to build a business, was staring at the screen with his mouth slightly open. The startup capital alone for this kind of operation, Ms. Richardson began with a $75,000 inheritance from her grandfather, Marcus explained. She leveraged that into purchasing a failing coffee shop in Queens, turned it profitable within 6 months, and used those profits plus a small business loan to acquire the second location. Every expansion since has been funded through revenue. She's never taken outside investment, maintaining full ownership and control. "That's impossible," my mother said faintly. "We would have known. Someone would have told us. The community." Marcus pulled up a Financial Times article on his iPad. "Ms. Richardson operates under R.M. Richardson for most business dealings. She specifically requested minimal public presence, focusing on building the business rather than personal brand. Although that's changing now. Forbes wants to do a feature on her for their Self-Made Women issue, and there's interest from several TV producers about a documentary on the company's sustainable sourcing practices. I watched my family's faces as Marcus continued his impromptu presentation, showing them photos of me with coffee industry leaders at international trade shows, screenshots of our social media presence, with hundreds of thousands of followers, and reviews from major food critics praising our innovative approach to coffee culture. Each piece of evidence was another crack in the wall of disbelief they'd built around me. "Show them the Starbucks meeting," I said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow but complied. "Ms. Richardson has a meeting scheduled with Starbucks executives next month. They're interested in potentially acquiring our sustainable sourcing technology. The preliminary offer..." He paused. "Well, let's just say it's substantial enough that Ms. Richardson is only taking the meeting out of professional courtesy." Jake had gone from mocking to calculating, and I could practically see the dollar signs reflected in his eyes. "Becky, why didn't you tell us this is incredible? As your brother, I should have been involved. I could have helped with the financial structuring, the investment strategies." "You did help," I said, my voice steady now. "Every time you laughed at my dreams, you motivated me to work harder. Every family dinner where you cataloged my failures, you reminded me why I needed to succeed on my own terms. Every joke about my little coffee shop job fueled another 18-hour day building something you couldn't dismiss." The room had gone silent except for the sound of Bradley frantically deleting his live stream videos. Uncle Theodore cleared his throat, his real estate mogul composure cracking. "Rebecca, when you came to me 3 years ago, with a business proposal you dismissed without reading," I finished. "Yes, I remember. I'd already had 2 successful locations then. I wasn't asking for money, Uncle Theodore. I was offering you the opportunity to invest. Your rejection taught me I didn't need anyone's approval or support to build something meaningful." My mother's face crumpled like tissue paper. "But I told everyone you were abroad. I was so ashamed." "I know," I said simply. "I heard about it from Mrs. Peterson's daughter. We actually met at a coffee industry conference in Seattle. She's been a Rising Sun member since our 3rd location opened. She was quite surprised to learn I was supposedly backpacking through Europe instead of keynoting a panel on sustainable business practices." Marcus Ever, the professional, began gathering his papers. "Ms. Richardson, do you need more time to review the acquisition documents? I can return tomorrow if you prefer." "No," I said, accepting the folder from him. "I'll review these tonight and have an answer by morning. Thank you for coming on Christmas, Marcus. I know your family is waiting." "It's my pleasure," he said, then turned to address the table. "You should be very proud of Ms. Richardson. In my 15 years in business, I've never worked for a more dedicated, innovative, or compassionate leader. The company culture she's built is studied in business schools now. Harvard just requested permission to use Rising Sun as a case study for their entrepreneurship program." As Marcus left, the dining room fell into a silence so complete, it felt like a physical presence. The same family that had spent the evening dissecting my failures and planning my intervention now sat frozen, their worldviews shattered like the wine glass Madison had just knocked over with her trembling hand. But we weren't done yet. Not even close. Because the truth had a momentum of its own now, and once started, it demanded to be fully revealed. The transformation was instantaneous and shameless, like watching a pack of hyenas suddenly realize the gazelle they'd been circling was actually a lion. Jake was the first to recover his mocking laughter, replaced by the calculated charm he usually reserved for high-net-worth clients. "Becky, Rebecca..." "Sis," he stammered, reaching across the table as if to physically grab the opportunity he'd missed. "This is amazing. I'm so proud of you. You know I was just joking earlier, right? It's just our family dynamic, the way we show love. Tough love. You know, I've always believed in you." I watched him with the detached interest of a scientist observing a particularly fascinating specimen. "Really? Was it tough love when you called me delusional 5 minutes ago? Or when you showed everyone my old Instagram posts to humiliate me?" Madison had recovered from her shock and was now practically vibrating with entrepreneurial excitement. "Rebecca, honey, we should talk about collaboration opportunities. My charity gala next month needs sponsors. And Rising Sun coffee collections would be perfect. We could do a coffee tasting, maybe name a blend after the cause. It would be such great publicity for your amazing business." "My little business," I repeated, savoring the slip. The one you said I was hallucinating. My parents had shifted into full damage control mode. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, though I couldn't tell if the tears were from shame or the sudden realization of how badly she'd miscalculated. Sweetheart, you have to understand, we were worried you disappeared for 5 years. We had no idea you were building this incredible empire. If we'd known. You'd have what? I asked. Treated me with respect, acknowledged my achievements, not planned an intervention to fix my delusional disorder. My father, ever the strategist, took a different approach. Rebecca, let's be practical here. You've built something remarkable, but managing growth at this scale requires experience. I have 40 years in finance. Jake has connections at Goldman Sachs. Uncle Theodore knows commercial real estate. We could help you take Rising Sun to the next level. Uncle Theodore nodded eagerly, his earlier dismissal forgotten. I know prime locations in every major city. With my connections and your business model, we could triple your footprint in 2 years. I'm thinking franchising opportunities, real estate investment trusts, international expansion. The same connections you refused to share when I came to you 3 years ago, I asked. When you told me to get a real job first? Bradley had put his phone away and was now looking at me with the kind of respect he usually reserved for tech billionaires. Rebecca, I mean Aunt Becky. Cousin Becky. Sorry, I don't know what to call you now, but this is incredible. We could create such amazing content together. Imagine the social media possibilities. Day in the life of a coffee CEO. Building an empire from nothing. We could probably get a Netflix deal. The same social media you used to live stream my humiliation, I reminded him. The Christmas cringe compilation, wasn't it? Grandmother Agnes, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I knew you had it in you. Your grandfather always said you were special. That's why he left you that money. He'd be so proud. You just said he'd be heartbroken by my choices, I pointed out. I was testing you, she claimed with surprising agility for someone her age. I wanted to see if success had changed you. It hasn't. You're still the same sweet Becky. The same sweet Becky they'd spent the last hour tearing apart, but I didn't bother pointing that out. Instead, I watched as each family member scrambled to rewrite history, painting themselves as secret supporters who'd always known I'd make it big. The pivot was so fast it could have caused whiplash. Jake pulled out his business card, sliding it across the table with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. I want you to know that Goldman Sachs has an entire division dedicated to sustainable businesses now. With your growth trajectory and profit margins, we could take you public within 3 years. I could personally manage the IPO. Keep it in the family, you know. An IPO. Madison's eyes lit up. Oh my God, yes, we could ring the opening bell together. I know exactly what I'd wear. We could make it a family affair. I almost laughed at the idea of Madison, who'd been filming my breakdown for entertainment 20 minutes ago, standing next to me at the New York Stock Exchange. Well, of course, she said as if it were obvious. We're family. Your success is our success. That's what Jake always says about family wealth. Right, honey? Jake nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. And speaking of family, I've actually been working on a side project that could really benefit from your expertise. It's a subscription box service for artisanal products. With your supply chain knowledge and my financial backing. Your financial backing, I interrupted. I thought you needed investors, or was that before you knew your delusional sister had money? The color drained from his face. How did you? Mrs. Chen from the country club, I said simply. Her daughter is my CFO. Small world, isn't it? She mentioned you'd been asking around for investors, that your project was hemorrhaging money. My mother seized on the revelation. Rebecca, that's perfect. You could invest in your brother's business. Family helping family. It would bring us all together again. The family that staged an intervention for my mental health, I asked. The family that created a group chat called Dealing with Becky. The family that saved my rejection letters and failure photos as evidence of my inadequacy. We were misguided, my father said with the tone of someone unused to admitting mistakes. But you have to understand, Rebecca, you vanished. You cut us off. We filled that void with assumptions. If you'd just told us what you were building, would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd called after year 1 and said I owned 3 coffee shops, would you have congratulated me or suggested therapy? Would you have supported me or told me not to get my hopes up? The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. We all knew the answer. They would have dismissed it, minimized it, found ways to explain why it wasn't really success or why it wouldn't last. Because that's what they'd always done with my dreams. Sandra cleared her throat. Rebecca, I know we haven't always been close, but I want you to know I'm starting my own business. A lifestyle blog. Maybe we could collaborate? I could feature your coffee shops, do taste tests, share your story with my followers. All 12 of them, I asked, and she flushed. I'm just starting out, she said defensively. But with your help? And there it was. The same family that had spent years telling me I was incapable of success now wanted me to enable theirs. The irony was thick enough to stir with a coffee spoon. You know what the funny thing is? I said, standing up and smoothing my Target dress. I came here tonight prepared to share my success with you, not to brag, but to include you in my joy. I thought maybe after 5 years we could have a fresh start. I even brought Christmas bonuses for everyone, checks drawn from my personal account, because despite everything, you're still my family. I pulled out the envelopes from my purse, each one containing a check for $10,000. I'd agonized over the amount, wanting it to be generous but not ostentatious. Now I placed them on the table one by one, watching their eyes track the movement like cats following a laser pointer. But now I realize something. I continued. You didn't just doubt my business. You doubted me. My worth as a person was tied to my bank account in your eyes. When you thought I was poor, I was a failure who needed intervention. Now that you know I have money, suddenly I'm worthy of respect and collaboration. But I'm the same person I was an hour ago. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my net worth. That's not true, my mother protested, reaching for her envelope. We love you regardless. Then why didn't that love stop you from planning tonight's ambush? I asked. Why didn't that love prevent you from keeping a greatest hits collection of my failures? Why didn't that love make you reach out even once in 5 years to ask how I was doing without judgment or agenda? The silence that followed was answer enough. They hadn't loved me regardless. They'd loved the idea of me. They'd constructed the failure they could pity and feel superior to. The successful me didn't fit their narrative, so they'd rejected her existence until forced to confront the evidence. I left the checks on the table and picked up my coat. Consider those a parting gift. Not from the delusional Becky you tried to fix tonight, but from the CEO you suddenly want to know. Use them however you want. Jake, maybe it'll help with your failing subscription box. Madison, perhaps it'll buy a table at your charity gala. Mom, Dad, maybe it'll help you maintain the facade at the country club a little longer. You're leaving, Jake asked, half rising from his chair. But we have so much to discuss. The IPO, the expansion, the family opportunities. I have a business to run, I said simply. 22 locations now once I sign these papers. And unlike this dinner, my coffee shops don't require me to prove my worth or defend my existence. My employees respect me for who I am, not what I can do for them. My customers come back because we provide value, not because they're obligated by blood. That's the family I chose, and they're waiting for me. I walked out of my parents' house that Christmas night with the kind of clarity that only comes from seeing people exactly as they are, not as you wish they were. The December air was sharp and clean, washing away the suffocating atmosphere of judgment and opportunism I'd left behind. As I sat in my Tesla, finally free to be myself, I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been putting off for 5 years. I blocked every single family member's number. Not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. Some bridges once burned provide better warmth than they ever did as connections. The drive back to the city was peaceful, accompanied by the soft jazz that Eric had introduced me to all those years ago. Funny how they'd mocked him for playing saxophone in subway stations, not knowing he now performed at Lincoln Center and had 3 Grammy nominations. We'd remained friends after our amicable split, and he'd been one of Rising Sun's first investors when I'd needed someone to believe in me. The supposedly loser musician had shown more faith in my dreams than my entire family combined. My phone, now blissfully free of toxic contacts, buzzed with a message from Marcus. Papers reviewed and ready for your signature. Also, the team wants to know if you're still coming to the Christmas party at the Brooklyn Roastery. They saved you cake. I smiled, the first genuine smile of the evening. On my way, I texted back. Tell them to break out the good coffee. We're celebrating. The Brooklyn Roastery was lit up like a constellation when I arrived, warm light spilling from the windows onto the snow-dusted street. Inside, my real family was waiting. The baristas who'd trusted me when I could barely pay them, the managers who'd worked 18-hour days beside me during expansions, the customers who'd become friends and advocates for our mission. They cheered when I walked in, not because of my net worth or my titles, but because I was Becky, and I belonged here. How was dinner with the family? Asked Sarah, my first hire and now COO, as she handed me a cup of our signature Christmas blend. Educational, I said, raising the cup in a toast. I learned that sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the absence of people who diminish you. 6 months later, the sale of Rising Sun coffee collections to a sustainable foods conglomerate was finalized for $52 million. I retained a minority stake and a seat on the board, but my day-to-day involvement ended. The freedom was intoxicating. I packed 2 suitcases and flew to Switzerland, not to flee or hide, but to attend the International Coffee Innovation Institute, an exclusive program that accepted only 12 students yearly from around the world. The mountains around Lucerne reminded me of the walls my family had built around their perceptions of me. Imposing, seemingly immovable, but ultimately irrelevant to my journey. I threw myself into learning, studying under master roasters from Ethiopia, supply chain experts from Colombia, and sustainability pioneers from Costa Rica. My classmates included a former diplomat who'd left government to revolutionize fair trade, a scientist developing climate-resistant coffee varieties, and an artist who saw coffee as a medium for community building. During those months in Switzerland, the messages from my family piled up in my blocked folder like snow on the Alpine peaks. Jake's investment banking career imploded when he was caught inflating valuations. Without my potential IPO to dangle before his superiors, his protective armor crumbled. He sent letter after letter through my lawyer, each more desperate than the last, begging for investment in his failed subscription box service that had burned through his savings and Madison's trust fund. Madison, for her part, divorced Jake within 3 months of Christmas dinner. She tried to friend me on every social media platform, leaving public comments about how we'd always been close and how she'd always believed in my vision. Her charity gala had to be canceled when sponsors pulled out, apparently unimpressed by her connection to a disgraced banker and her lack of any actual charitable work. My parents downsized from their Connecticut mansion to a modest condo, their retirement plans shattered by my father's bad investments and their obsession with maintaining appearances. The country club membership was the last thing to go sold to cover the capital gains taxes on the house. My mother sent cards to my company's headquarters, each one a masterclass in rewriting history, painting herself as the supportive mother who'd always encouraged my entrepreneurship. Uncle Theodore's real estate empire crumbled when over-leveraged properties went underwater. He who'd refused to even look at my business plan now begged for a meeting, promising to share valuable insights in exchange for a small loan. Bradley's tech startup, built on borrowed money and inflated metrics, collapsed spectacularly. His 50,000 Instagram followers couldn't save him from bankruptcy, though he tried to pivot to being a failure guru, sharing lessons learned from his spectacular crash. Even grandmother Agnes felt the ripple effects. Without my parents' support, and with her savings depleted by gifts to Jake's doomed ventures, she had to sell her retirement community apartment. The woman who'd said my grandfather would be heartbroken by my choices discovered that actions have consequences even at 90. I heard about all of this secondhand through the efficient grapevine of mutual acquaintances and business connections. Each piece of news arrived like a postcard from a country I no longer visited, interesting but irrelevant to my daily life. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, no joy in their failures. They were simply experiencing the natural consequences of their choices, just as I had experienced the rewards of mine. In Switzerland, I met David, a fellow student from Nigeria, who was working to bring specialty coffee cultivation to regions devastated by climate change. We spent hours debating processing methods and social justice hiking mountain trails, while discussing how business could be a force for positive change. He never once asked about my net worth or my family connections. He was interested in my ideas, my dreams, my vision for using coffee as a tool for community empowerment. "You know what I love about coffee," he said one evening as we watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. "It's honest. Good coffee can't lie about what it is. It either has the quality or it doesn't. No amount of marketing or family connections can make bad coffee taste good." I thought about my family then, about how they'd tried to market themselves as supportive the moment they smelled success, how they'd attempted to repackage their cruelty as care. "People should be more like coffee," I said. "Some are," he replied, taking my hand. "You just have to know how to recognize quality when you find it." A year after that Christmas dinner, I was back in New York for a coffee industry conference where I was delivering the keynote on sustainable scaling. My topic: building authentic success in a synthetic world. The ballroom was packed with entrepreneurs, journalists, and industry leaders. In the front row sat my former employees, beaming with pride. Marcus had flown in from San Francisco, where he was now running his own consulting firm. Sarah was there with her new baby, born into a world where her mother's former boss had become a lifelong friend and mentor. Halfway through my speech, I spotted a familiar figure in the back of the room. Jake, looking older, and worn his expensive suit replaced by off-the-rack business casual. Our eyes met across the distance, and I saw recognition, regret, and something that might have been genuine pride flicker across his face. I didn't acknowledge him, didn't pause in my presentation. He was just another audience member now, no more or less important than any other stranger in the crowd. After the keynote during the Q&A session, someone asked about the role of family in entrepreneurship. "Do you need family support to succeed?" I considered the question carefully. "You need support," I said finally. But family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes your real family is the mentor who believes in you when no one else does. Sometimes it's the employee who stays late to help you figure out a problem. Sometimes it's the customer who brings their friends because they believe in what you're building. Sometimes it's the stranger who becomes a partner because they see your vision when others only see your flaws. The family you're born into gives you your starting point, I continued. But the family you choose determines your destination. And sometimes the greatest gift your birth family can give you is the motivation to prove them wrong, to build something so undeniable that even their disbelief has to yield to reality. The audience applauded, and I saw Jake slip out the back door. I never saw him again, though I heard he'd started over in a small town in Oregon, working at a credit union and coaching youth basketball. Maybe he'd found his own path to authenticity. I hope so, for his sake. That evening, David and I had dinner with our chosen family. The mentors who'd guided us, the partners who'd believed in us, the friends who'd celebrated our victories and cushioned our falls. We toasted with Ethiopian coffee instead of champagne, savoring the complex flavors that had brought us all together. To the mockers, I raised my cup, thinking of that Christmas dinner that had changed everything. May they always remind us who we don't want to become. To the dreamers, David added, may they always remember that the best revenge is a life well lived. Looking around that table at faces lit with genuine affection and mutual respect, I realized my family had been right about one thing: I had been delusional. I'd been delusional to spend so many years seeking approval from people incapable of giving it. I'd been delusional to measure my worth by their standards instead of my own. I'd been delusional to think I needed their belief to make my dreams real. But delusions, like coffee beans, can be transformed by enough heat and pressure. What starts as something raw and bitter can become something rich and complex, capable of energizing and inspiring. My family's mockery had been the heat. Their disbelief had been the pressure. And I'd emerged from that crucible not broken, but refined. Rising Sun coffee collections continued to thrive under new ownership, maintaining the values and culture we'd built together. Every quarterly report showed growth both in revenue and in the positive impact on coffee-growing communities worldwide. The scholarship fund I'd established for unconventional entrepreneurs, funded by the sale proceeds, had already supported dozens of dreamers who'd been told they weren't enough. I named it the Agnes Richardson Foundation after my grandfather's wife, who'd shown me that sometimes the greatest gift is being underestimated. Every rejection letter, every mocking laugh, every dismissive comment had been fuel for the fire that forged my success. My family thought they were putting me in my place that Christmas night. Instead, they'd freed me to find it on my own. Now, as I wrap up this story from my apartment overlooking Central Park, paid for not by family money, but by the dreams they mocked, I want to leave you with this thought. Your worth is not determined by the people who share your DNA. Your potential is not limited by their imagination. Your dreams are not subject to their approval. So, here's my question for you. Who in your life is holding you back with their disbelief? Whose mockery is secretly motivating you to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who've turned doubt into determination, who've transformed mockery into motivation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over family dysfunction and entrepreneurial success against all odds. And please share this with someone who needs to hear that their dreams are valid, even if their family doesn't see it yet. Thank you for listening to my story. May your coffee be strong, your dreams be stronger, and may you always remember that sometimes the best family is the one you choose for yourself. Until next time, this is Becky Richardson reminding you that success is the best response to those who said you couldn't.